Hello everybody and welcome back to ESO Guides with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be talking about the Sorcerer class, the most powerful shock damage and physical damage class out there. Now, I'm not going to say it's like the best, but it does give you greater physical and shock damage. And we'll get into all that as soon as we get into the class right now. So we're going to start with the Dark Magic tree. We're going to start with the ultimate, which is Negate Magic. Now, the great thing about playing a Sorc, before I get too far in there, the great thing about playing a Sorc is you get a lot of different benefits. Just like all classes have their benefits, but they also have their weaknesses as well. And one of the weaknesses that a Sorc gets is they don't get any damage reduction on their character, on any of the trees anywhere. So you really have to focus on getting some damage reduction from other places. A good thing to do if you're playing a stamina version is grab Circle of Protection. If you can't grab Circle of Protection, put more into Hardy and Elemental Defender. That way you get that greater resistances. I wouldn't dump too much into there because you are going to be wasting your points, and you're going to have to get more resistant stuff somewhere else, especially if you're tanking. So let's get into this. So Negate Magic creates a globe of magic suppression, dispelling enemy placed effects instantly, and enemies within the globe are stunned for 10 seconds. Enemy players will be silenced rather than stunned. So if you have been in a combat thing where they drop like an ice circle around you and then they cast this purple bubble around you, well, that's Negate Magic. And it makes you silent, so you can't cast any abilities. Well, it stuns enemies, like PvE enemies, and it silences players. So it's really an effective thing to use in either PvP or PvE because of that. Now, it does have two morphs. The first one is Suppression Field. Now, this is one of my preferred go-to things on my Sorc because it gives you a globe that also damages enemies standing inside. Now, my Sorc wears 5-piece Pelinals with a 5-piece Pelinals in light armor, and then I wear a 5-piece, I can't even think of what it's called now, Spriggan set. Now, if you don't know what that does, wearing 5-piece light gives me spell penetration. Wearing 5-piece Spriggans gives me physical penetration, and I do use 2 sharpened weapons. So I get both spell and physical penetration because of it. I also am a hybrid, so I have both Magicka and Stamina, and I'm a Wood Elf, so I get more Stamina recovery, and I get a greater Stamina pool because of it. I have to put a lot more into Magicka, but that's okay. So I made a hybrid character so I could do that. And I can do a really good amount of damage with that ability. Now, this is another one you can do if you're playing a healer. I would suggest doing this if you're playing a healer only or a Magicka, fully Magicka-based character, because this does get based on the healing return is based on max Magicka. So creating a globe, you get this suppression field, and your globe also heals you and your allies every 0.5 seconds for 10 seconds. So every 0.5 seconds, you're giving a heal out. So this is really good for a healer, because you not only stun your enemies, not allowing them to do any damage, but you also give health back to your allies, giving them a way of recovering health. So for a healer, this is really great. For a DPS or a tank, Suppression Field is really, really good. Next one up is Crystal Shards. Now, Crystal Shards is a go-to for every Sorc. Conjure a Dark Crystal to bombard an enemy, dealing X Magicka damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. But it's the morph that they go after. The first morph is Crystal Blast, also damages enemies near the initial target. So you get to do more AoE type damage with this. Now, everyone usually goes with Crystal Fragments. And the reason they go with Crystal Fragments is because other Magicka abilities have a chance to make your next Crystal Fragments an instant cast to deal more damage and cost less. It costs nothing. Almost 50% less Magicka. I mean, it practically costs nothing then. And it does 20% more damage. So that's why a lot of people use this morph. I actually use this one because I want that AoE damage. But I don't use it right now. Call Daedric Shards from the earth to immobilize enemies in front of you. This is really good for tanks, a Magicka tank, because you can lock down enemies. Now, this ability cannot be blocked. That means no matter what, they cannot stop it from hitting them. It will always immobilize them for 4.5 seconds. Now, you get Shattering Prison, and you also get Restraining Prison. This one deals enemies when the effect ends. That means it does AoE damage when the effect ends, which is pretty good, because if you lock down 5 enemies, that's 5 enemies doing AoE damage. But restraining one, enemies are snared when effect ends, so it slows them for 4 seconds. So they're not only stunned for 4 seconds where they can't move, or immobilized for 4 seconds where they can't move, but the next one slows them for 4 seconds. This is much better for tanking, in my opinion, than this one. This is greater for DPS, especially Magicka DPS, because then you can lock them down and keep them at a distance. And then when that effect ends, anything that's locked down is going to take increased damage. So you got those two choices. Next is Ruin Prison. Now this is a kind of a weird one because it basically imprisons the enemy in a sphere of dark magic, disorientating them for 16.6 seconds. The disorient is broken if the enemy takes damage. So this is something that you're going to cast on them and then not deal with them. You're going to cast on an enemy that's further away and not deal with them. This is called a crowd control effect. So it's really good for a tank to cast this on like a caster at a distance and focus on a DPS enemy or something like that, or on the boss if there's ads, because then that person is not doing any damage for 16.6 seconds. It has 2 morphs, Ruin Cage. The disorientate is only broken if the enemy takes direct damage and not damage over time. So you can drop a damage over time near them and they can still take that damage, and also they're unless you hit them with direct damage, which means a heavy or a light attack or a melee attack, will it do that. Defensive Ruin. Now this is a really cool one because you cast a spell on yourself, disorientating the next enemy who attacks you. Now this I like to use as a tank, because it does the disorientate on anyone who attacks me at a distance. So that means anyone who attacks me at a distance will be disorientated for 16.6 seconds. So I'm not having to turn to cast it on them. I can cast it on myself and then they get hit with it. Really, really powerful thing. And you can only have one defensive ruin at a time, so you got to cast it, let somebody become disorientated, cast it again, and then the next person who hits you is going to also become disorientated. You can lock down a whole group with this thing. Just saying. You just have to cast it continuously. Another really great one is the next ability, Dark Exchange. Bargain with darkness to restore health and magicka. Now this costs stamina, so if you're a magicka-based character, this is really beneficial to you because it gives you both magicka and health recovery, but it's not something that you want to focus on because it takes 1 second to cast. Now the next one is Dark Deal, and this converts into a heal that does health and stamina, and it costs magicka. So if you're playing like a hybrid character, you can use some of that magicka to give you health and stamina if you need it. Or if you're playing a hybrid using stamina abilities for one thing and magicka for another, you can do this one, which has a reduced cost. So you get that stamina at a reduced cost. So you got that choice of which one you want to go with if you're playing a hybrid. Do you want more, are you focusing more on magic damage, or are you focusing like your magic towards buffs and stuff, or are you focusing on damage with your melee weapons, kind of thing. You get that choice. I use this one personally because I do like having that reduced cost of stamina, and the fact that I'm wearing 5 pieces of light armor, and I'm a wood elf, and I can reduce my stamina and magicka costs. My magicka by 5% and then my stamina by 20% or 10%, I get that, offset kind of thing. And this doesn't cost me near as much. Next is Daedric Mines. Now this is an amazing ability. It's a lot like the Fighters Guild's mines or traps, but it's a little different. Surprise your foes by placing 3 volatile Daedric Mines around you which arm after 3 seconds. When the mine is triggered, it explodes, dealing X magicka damage and immobilizing the enemy for 1.5 seconds. It's super, super cool. Now the next one, though, you place the mines at the target location instead, and the mines arm instantly. So that means if you're walking into a room and you cast this, it's going to arm the traps automatically, and unless they're hit, the enemy's hit, you can make them move through them and they take the damage. So it's a very powerful damage dealing ability. Next is Daedric Minefield. And instead you place 5 mines around you instead of 3. So you got those 2 choices. It does cost a heck of a lot of magicka, so it's better to use this in light armor. Excuse me. Next we're going to get into the passives. DKs are Sorcs and Templars are the only classes that get reduced magic and stamina costs. And because of that, we can play in light and medium armor and get greater advantages out of it. Now, we also get, light, medium, and heavy armor, so we get greater advantage no matter what armor we're in. Now, if you're not if you're not a Sorc or a Templar, you have to put the points, more points into those costs reductions in those points, and it makes it a lot harder to actually get more effect out of them. Now, while using dark magic abilities, when hitting an enemy with a dark magic ability also heals you for 8% of your max health. This is a way that you can get some extra healing, especially if you're using things like Crystal Blast, because it's going to hit multiple enemies. That means for every enemy hit, you're going to get healed for 8% of your max health. Really beneficial. If you're using the mines, the same thing. Persistence. While using dark magic abilities, increase the duration of dark magic abilities by 20%. So just remember, all these abilities up here, if they have a time frame on how long they last, like this heal over time, is going to be increased, or the length of this thing is going to be increased by 20%. So it's going to go up even greater. This is going to be 20% longer. So it's actually going to be 20 seconds in length. This one is going to be longer. This actually goes up to like 7 or 8 seconds that they're locked down. But you have to max out the thing to get it. The next one is Exploitation. Activating dark magic ability grants minor proficiency to nearby allies, increasing their spell critical by so much for 20%. Now, what I like to play in a group is a Templar, a Nightblade, a Sorc, and a DK. Because of the benefits that each one offers, you can get a lot of really powerful benefits from each class type, making a really powerful group. Because of things like this, and because of like the DK gives 5% weapon damage, the Templar gives 5% magic damage, those kind of things, or spell damage, spell damage. So you get that 25% spell damage, that 25% weapon damage to your whole group, makes it super beneficial to have both of those. But on top of that, this one gives you extra spell critical, and then the other, the Nightblade gives extra weapon critical. Next is Daedric Summoning. A lot of people don't like the Daedric Summoning abilities because the pets don't have a really great health pool, and they don't work really well in trials. But in dungeons, pets are amazing. I'm not going to lie. First one is Storm Anarok. Now this one is pretty crazy, because when it summons a Storm Anarok at your location, the Anarok's arrival deals X shock damage and stuns nearby enemies for 3 seconds. The Anarok cannot move, but attacks the nearest enemy. Now it does a ton of damage, I'm not going to lie. An ally can activate Charge Lightning, giving both the ally and the Anarok major berserk, increasing their damage by 25% for 8 seconds. That's a lot of damage increase. Now just think if you're playing and somebody drops this in your tank. I activate this when I tank because I have a friend who uses Storm Anarok. And I get that 8%, that 25% extra damage on top of the 40% I get, or the 20% I get, along with the other, the 30% or 30% I get. So I get 55% more damage from my light and heavy attacks. It is amazing. Greater Storm Anarok increases the duration, the damage, and its health. This thing can stay out for a longer time in a boss encounter that way. And you can activate this. Everyone can, I can activate this, and then a few seconds later somebody else can activate it, and then a few seconds later somebody else can activate it, giving us all 25% extra damage. So it's not just one person who can activate this energy, a lot of people can. Now the next one is really powerful, because it has a powerful area effect attack. It does a lightning shock outwards. So remember, you get increased shock damage, and it does carry over into your pets. So it becomes more powerful. An ally can activate Charge Lightning, also giving them major berserk. But that area of effect is super massive damage. I'm not kidding you. Next is Unstable Familiar. Now I like to use the morph of Unstable Familiar, but I have my different reasons. But it commands the powers of Oblivion to send a Daedric Familiar to fight at your side. The Familiar's attack deals shock damage plus 15% additional damage on top of it. And the familiar remains until killed by or unsummoned. So they do have a certain health pool right now, but that health pool and their resistances are changing with the next update. If you go look up the Homestead patch notes, you can actually look at them and get an idea of what they're changing to. We don't have the full patch notes yet until it actually launches in February, but this is changing. They're getting more increased health and more increased resistances. Now this is the one I run. I run Unstable Clan Fear. Now I don't run it all the time, but I do have it unlocked because of the purpose of what it does for me. So what this does is it changes the Unstable Familiar into one of those little dino lizard things with like they look like a Triceratops kind of, with just the flat head instead of the horns, and they run on 2 legs instead of 4. They're like a raptor Triceratops thing. And the Clan Fear deals physical damage plus an additional 15%. The Clan Fear can also tail swipe nearby enemies. And when they do the tail swipe, it can stun them or set them off balance. Once summoned, you can activate the Clan Fear special ability, healing you and the Clan Fear for 35% of your health. So you can get a heal on there as well. Now, the reason I use it is because of one of the passives, and I'll get into it in a second. Now, Volatile Familiar, you summon a Volatile Familiar. Once summoned, you can activate the Familiar's special ability to pulse area damage and stun enemies. Now, it does shock damage again, so if you have increased shock damage, their damage does more too, because you're basically summoning a Daedric monster that is a representation of your effect. So, causing the familiar pulse shock damage every 2 seconds for 4 seconds to enemies near him. So you can synergize. You can do this as much as you want. You can trigger it every 3 seconds or 4 seconds. So you do that constant effect. But this thing has a really low health pool for some reason, and it dies really quick in dungeons. Next is Daedric Curse. Curse an enemy with a destruction rune, dealing X magic damage to the target and Y magic damage to all nearby enemies after 6 seconds. This is a super powerful ability. I'm not lying, because I do use this. You get Daedric Prey. Your pet deals additional damage to cursed targets, and then you get this one, which the curse deals its damage faster. So that means instead of 6 seconds, it's 3.5 seconds. Now this is the morph I use, and I hit a single target and a crowd. And then I will wait until it blows up, and then I'll cast it on another target in that crowd that has greater health. So that way I can kill the enemies quicker, and it goes fast. So next is Summon Winged Twilight. A lot of people like using this one. I don't blame them. Call an Azura to send a Winged Twilight to fight at your side. The Winged Twilight's attacks deal shock damage plus an additional 15% damage on top of that. So whatever you get bonus and shock damage, they get 15% more. The Winged Twilight remains until killed or unsummoned. Now the great thing about the 2 morphs is, depending on which one you choose. One, you summon a Twilight Torment. Once summoned, you can activate the Twilight special ability and grant it a damage bonus to high health enemies. So if the enemies have above 50% health, that does 50% more damage to them. So it becomes a really powerful damage dealer above 50% health enemies. Now the next one is what I like to use. You summon a Twilight Matriarch. Once summoned, you can activate its special ability to heal the Matriarch and up to 2 nearby allies. Now I like to use this because of that heal. And it makes it really easy for me to stand near it and just tap it every once in a while, giving that, or have it near my allies and tap it every once in a while to give that heal. Next is Bound Armaments. Or Bound Armor. Bound Armor is a really great ability for a Sorc because it gives you extra physical resistance and it increases your max magicka by 5%. Now it does have a stamina morph and it has a magicka morph. Now either way you go, it doesn't matter. You're going to get some super great benefits out of it. The first one, if you're a tank, you're going to go with Bound Armaments. And the reason you're going to go with Bound Armaments, even if you're a Magicka tank, is because your armor also increases the damage with heavy attacks by 11% and increases max stamina by 5%. So it allows you to hybridize your character a little bit better as a hybrid tank. Now, if you want to play a hybrid player, this also allows you to be more of a hybrid player as well. Now, you do get Minor Resolve with this one, but with the other one you get also grants Minor Ward. So you get both spell and physical resistance, and you get max magicka. Now this is a toggle thing, so when you put it on, when you cast it, it is cast and it is on you until you turn it off. So it's best to keep this on both bars. So no matter what, you're going to have this on both bars, giving you that Minor Ward or Minor Resolve and that max stamina, max magicka, no matter what, continuously. Because when you switch bars, getting that extra stamina back sucks, or getting that extra magicka back sucks. So Next is Conjure Ward. Now this is a damage shield, and it is based on max magicka, but it also affects your pet. So if you're playing with a pet, this is really an effective thing because you can keep your pet protected as well. And that damage shield is based on your max magicka. So you can give them a really powerful damage shield. Now you get two choices. You get Hardened Ward and you get Empowered Ward. Now Hardened Ward is really good if you're tanking because your own globe absorbs 30% more damage. So you can get that 30% increased through Bastion. So it's 40%, 50% depending. So it becomes more powerful for you. And it's already a huge shield because it's based on max magicka and max spell damage. So that you get a greater shield. Next is Empowered Ward. Conjure Daedric, energy to protect you, granting you a damage shield. But it also grants minor intellect to you and nearby allies, increasing your magic or recovery by 10%. And it also reduces the cost of and duration. It reduces the cost, increases the duration, and also grants you and your allies minor intellect. So you get the greater reduced cost, the greater duration, or increases its duration, so it lasts a little bit longer, and it gives your group minor intellect, which gives them greater spell recovery. So that's a really good one to use, and it lasts for 10 seconds instead of 6 seconds. So you get the two choices here either way. Now, I would prefer using this as a stamina tank kind of thing, or a magicka tank, because of that. Now, I would use this until I can unlock something else, which we'll have to get to when we get into guild skills. Next is your passive, of course, excuse me, where you get Rebate. Now, Rebate is a really good ability, especially if you play with a pet, because if one of your summoned pets dies, you restore 15% of your max magicka. So if you're in a dungeon and your pet dies, you're still going to you're going to get that back. They also get a thing called Power Stone, which is a reduced cost to their ultimate abilities by 15%. Now they make really amazing tanks and DPS because of this, because then it allows them to fire off their ultimates more often. They don't get that like 3 extra like we do as Templars and Dragon Knights, but they do get the reduced cost. So it'd be good to find them something that gives them extra ultimate gain quicker. Next, we get Daedric Summoning, or Daedric Protection. Now, this is the one I do like, because when a Daedric Summoning ability is slotted, you increase your health and stamina recovery by 20%. As a tank, this is really, a stamina tank, this is really important. As a magicka tank, this is really important because you get that 20% health recovery and you get that stamina recovery, so you can fire off abilities that are stamina based or magicka based, depending on what you're going for, and it allows you to put them down, like Circle of Protection, like I said. So you can place Circle of Protection and then get your stamina back quicker. You also get Expert in Summoner. Now this is the really cool one, because when you cast a pet, summon a pet, your max health goes up by 8%. So if you're tanking in light armor, you get 8% max health, which is the equivalent of almost wearing heavy armor. Because that 8%, you get 2% from the heavy armor piece you're going to have equipped, and you're going to get the 8% from this, making it 10%. So it's almost like being a tank in heavy armor wearing light armor. So it's super, super beneficial to use a pet. Now remember, you can use your Hardened Ward or Empowered Ward to shield you and your pet. And here soon they're getting a change, like I said, in health and in resistances. Next is Storm Calling. Now this is the uber damage tree of this one. I'm not kidding you. You get Overload. Now Overload, what it does is it basically makes you like the Emperor from Star Wars, where you shoot lightning from your hands, and it's very powerful. Regardless if you have a lot of magic damage or shock damage, it's still very powerful because it does a lot of damage really quick. Now the initial one does shock damage and heavy attacks, blast enemies in a target area for Y shock damage. So you can shoot lightning bolts out from your hands just by tapping the attack button, or you can hold it down and charge like lightning out of your fingers, out of your hands, shooting it out like the Emperor, like I said, and doing that. Both attacks deal 3% additional damage with this, and attacks deplete ultimate until you run out of the ability. Now, if you have soon, ultimates are going to be dropping the ultimate amount you can have to 500, so you're not going to get as much effect out of this as you would before when you'd have 1,000 ultimate. And you got to remember, this thing's reduced by 15%, so this thing can do a lot of damage really fast. The morphs, the power overload and the energy overload, both have different benefits. One does increased range and radius, so that the range of this thing and the radius gets bigger off of heavy attacks. So your lightning shooting from the hands becomes more massive, and it's more like fighting when the Emperor was fighting Mace Windu, you know, on the windowsill, and he's zapping them with lightning and stuff out the window, and he's hitting them way out there. That's pretty much the same thing you'll be able to do. Now, energy overload is what a lot of Sorcs, Magicka Sorcs like to use, because now both attacks deal 3% additional damage and restore so much Magicka. And remember, you can toggle this on and off, and you get that Magicka return whenever you do a heavy attack and you charge it for a long time, or you use a light attack. You're going to get Magicka back. It's really beneficial for resource management. Next is Mage's Fury. Now this is their, a lot of people call this their execute. Now I just call it, you know, it's a great area of effect damage thing, because you call down a lightning strike to hit an enemy. It does a little bit of damage. If the enemy's health is below 20% though, an explosion deals additional shock damage and the target to the target, and so much shock damage to enemies nearby. It's really powerful. Now, Mage's Wraith, the first morph, explosion deals more damage, so you do greater damage to enemies around them. The next one is Killing Blows restores Magicka. This is why they call it an execute, is because if you do that, you get so much Magicka restored, and it's a really powerful ability. So trying to get an enemy down to 20% health, then hitting them with this, does a great amount of damage. And you can spam it because it will cost you almost nothing in light armor. Next is your lightning form. Now this is how they get their major resolve and major ward. Remember how I told you guys about this? This is like your defensive thing. This is something you're gonna want on your bar regardless of what you're playing, and that's because it gives you greater resistances, which means the amount of damage you can block up front before your damage reduction kicks in. So keeping this ability active on them is really good, because it does shock damage for the first part. So in the beginning, you're only going to be doing shock damage until you get the morphs. Now, once you get the morphs, you're going to get an option for a stamina morph or a Magicka morph. Now, either way you go, you're going to get this benefit. You're going to get that major resolve. And this one gives you major expedition, or minor expedition, giving you increased movement speed by 10%. The other one is going to increase the duration, and you gain major expedition for a brief period after activation, increasing your movement speed. Now this one gets major expedition, but it also gives you shock damage. The other one gives you physical damage. So this is better for a stamina-based character or a person focusing more towards stamina damage. But if you're playing a Magicka-based character and still using some stamina abilities, this is the way to go, because you're going to be wearing light armor. It's going to be reduced cost. Now this, because it's a stamina ability, does get a reduced cost because of that. And it's a super powerful ability anyways. Next up is Lightning Splash. Now this is an area of effect lightning damage spell. It's like calling a lightning storm. And it creates an excess of storm energy at a target location, dealing X shock damage to nearby enemies every 1 second. While active, allies can activate the conduit to deal X, so it's a synergy as well. Now one has an additional duration, and then there's another, that's Liquid Lightning, and then Lightning Flood has an increased radius. This thing is pretty big. I mean, it's a big circle on the ground, and it's hitting multiple enemies. The difference is that the one with the increased duration means you get to do greater damage over a longer period of time. This one allows you to do greater damage in a bigger area. So you got two choices to go with, and really it's up to you. Most people do go with Liquid Lightning, I'm not going to lie. Next is Surge. Now this is their uber power. And the reason I call it their uber power is because no matter what you're doing with this class, you're always going to want a high critical, especially if you're a tank. And this is how they get a lot of damage mitigation, is because anytime they do a critical strike, they get a heal. But it gives you major brutality. Remember, this increasing your weapon damage for 33 seconds. So for 33 seconds, you get this ability to do extra weapon damage, but you also get healing on top of it whenever you hit with a critical. And this heal grows really big, especially if you're in heavy armor or if you have a way of increasing your health healing received and stuff. That's a way to do it, and this will make your heals huge. It lasts for 33 seconds, so you don't need to have a big magicka pool to cast it. You're going to cast it once, you're going to wait, and let it let it do its thing. Now, there is 2 morphs, Power Surge and Critical Surge. Now, Power Surge also gains major sorcery, increasing your spell damage. Now, Critical Surge increases the healing it gets. Now, if I'm playing a stamina-based character, I'm going to go with Critical Surge. If I'm playing a magicka-based character, I'm going to go with Power Surge. If I'm playing a hybrid, I'm going to go with Power Surge. Now, I use Power Surge personally. I don't use Critical Surge because I don't need that increased heal. I need this. And the reason I need this is because I do play a hybrid sword. I want that major brutality and that major sorcery. And like I said, I use Pelinals, which gives me both my weapon damage and my spell damage as equal. And since I put mostly into spell damage, I get greater spell damage. Or is it weapon damage? I don't remember. One of the two. But I get greater of both. And then when I cast this, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get that major brutality and that major sorcery. So it doesn't matter. And it would probably be better if I went with this, I'm not going to lie. But I just use this one for that increased sorcery kind of thing. And I like the way it looks because it's more lightning-y on my character. So next is Bolt Escape. Now this is a really cool thing if you want to get around in a battlefield. It doesn't cost a whole lot when you're wearing light armor. If you're wearing heavy armor, you can get the cost reduced by about 10%, maybe a little bit more. But it transforms yourself into pure energy and flash forward, stunning enemies near origin location for 2 seconds. Casting again within 4 seconds costs 50% more. So it's better to use it once in a while, not continuously. Now you get 2 morphs. You get Streak, which damages and stuns enemies in front of you as you go through them with it. And then you get Ball Lightning, which also absorbs any projectiles being cast at you while you're moving through with this ability. So and they both do shock damage. So no matter what, you're going to get that shock damage as you're moving forward, but you're also going to absorb it. Now, casting within 4 seconds on both these does increase the magicka cost. Now, that's the bad thing about it. Now, the good thing is you do get increased magic recovery in your first passive in the Storm Tree Capacitor, which increases magic recovery by 10%. So you do have a greater chance of getting magicka back playing a Sorc. And on top of that, you get Energized, increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. Now, the great thing about this is they make great physical DPS and shock DPS at the same time, because you can increase both by 10% really easy. You can increase both by 20% really easy by you don't have to put as many points into those things to give you increased damage. So that means you can focus into other things like critical damage or even your penetration or other things to give you greater damage potential. So just remember that when you put together a Sorc, you can put into both areas, giving you greater damage potential if you're playing a hybrid. Next, you get Implosion. Now, Implosion is like one of the coolest abilities, especially if you're using a hybrid. Because when you deal shock damage, you have a 6% chance to instantly disintegrate an enemy under 15% health, dealing Y shock damage. Or, whenever you deal physical damage, you have a 6% chance to instantly pulverize the enemy under 15% health, dealing Y physical damage. So if you're playing a hybrid, doesn't matter. You're going to do a ton of damage. And then when you get them to 6% health, you get a chance of pulverizing them or shocking or just disintegrating them. If you're playing just a shock damage dealer or a physical damage dealer, you still get those benefits. Next up is Expert Mage. Now, Expert Mage is really one. Increases spell damage and weapon damage by 2% for each sorcery ability slotted. Now, remember, I run Power Surge, Liquid Light or Lightning Flood, and Hurricane on my character. Now, I also have this on my character, the Mage's Wrath, and so I have 2 on 1 bar. I have my Liquid Lightning and Mage's Wrath on 1 bar, and I have Hurricane and Power Surge on another bar. So I get that 4% extra weapon damage no matter what on either bar. So it's really beneficial for me to keep it that way, so I get that increased weapon damage. Now, whenever I cast my Morph up here, the Power Surge, I get extra weapon damage. or I can get extra, the weapon damage on top of it. So it gives me 24% extra weapon damage. And that's why I run that way, is because I get that 4% extra weapon damage no matter what bar I'm on. So if I'm using just my morphs or whatever, or I'm casting some buffs on myself, I still maintain that extra weapon damage. Now I run this on one bar. My light and heavy attacks restore magicka, but it has less bonus damage. I run this on one bar, and then I run on my other bar, I run this. The one with that does the damage over time. So if I can, I'll use this on my back bar where I have my morphs, and then I run the shield on the other bar, so I get that damage shield. So because I run this on my back bar as well, I get 6% extra damage, giving me 25% extra weapon damage when I do this. So it does more damage. Because this will grow not just off spell damage, but also off of weapon, or it grows off of spell damage. So I get that 20% spell damage, but I have that weapon damage there as well. So I can toggle between this and that, giving me greater damage if I need to get resources back. And then I run magic damage on both my weapons, absorb magic on both my weapons, both front and back bars. So I do magic damage on top of it. Well, I run absorb magic on one weapon and shock damage on the other. Sorry. So I get that increased shock damage, and I get that increased magic absorb. So I get more magic back whenever I do heavy attack or light attack. So I weave those in a lot, and I do dual wield. So, but that's the sort, guys. I hope that I gave you guys enough information to kind of understand the different effects that you can get from the different abilities with this class. If I did, great. I'm super excited for you guys for learning more about the game. If you guys enjoyed this video, though, go ahead and hit that like button. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe and be notified when I post videos in YouTube. But other than that, guys, that's it for now. Until next time, have a wonderful week. I will see you later. Bye.